trouble that still is with us. This is jobs. So jobs were growing in 2007. They start to weaken in the first half of 2008, and then Paulson scares us to death, and businesses, in preparation for the Great Depression, cut back jobs in an unprecedented rapid rate, an enormous amount of job loss that we had. And since then, the job formation has been very, very tepid, extremely tepid. You're gonna see me talking in a minute about V's and U's and L's. So this is not a V shape. V means you lose a couple million jobs or more in the first stroke of the V. The second stroke of the V, you get them back. That's not happening. That's the real puzzle of this recovery, with incredibly stimulative monetary policy and fiscal policy like we've never had before either, with two distinct proposals, budget proposals that were passed. Neither one of them seems to have had much impact, in the sense the job market remains very moribund. Where are the jobs? Why is this so different from historic recessions and recoveries in which there is no recovery? We're getting growth, but we're not getting recovery, job-type recovery, and the exceptional growth that goes along with those recoveries. To think about this is for your personal portfolios, for your business planning. The way we've thought about it in a kind of simple-minded way, there are basically 4 scenarios for the U.S. economy. And the way you allocate your portfolio depends on which scenario you think is more likely. The first scenario is that we get a rapid recovery. GDP growth is normally 3%, but to put Americans back to work, you're going to get 5s and 6s. So in a normal recovery, we'd have the unemployment declining back to 5% pretty quickly, because the job market would be very strong. You get exceptional growth, and then in that case, U.S. equities are still a bargain. A lot of room for appreciation in U.S. equities. Let's understand that one of the big drivers for high valuations is low real rates of interest, and we still have an incredibly low real rate of interest, and that's likely to persist for a long time, which forces you to take on some risk sooner or later. So here's number 2. This is a scenario in which there's no recovery, but then we go back to 3% growth. That scenario has unemployment stuck about where it is, in a range of 9 to 10%. But you have enough growth so that you don't have rising unemployment. The PIMCO scenario, which I don't think it was well thought out, the 2% growth comes with ever rising unemployment, because you have the power of productivity growth that making those who are currently employed more and more productive. And the economy with 2% growth is going to be creating more and more unemployment. You need about 3% growth in order to maintain the unemployment rate where it is. So the PIMCO scenario is pretty bad news, both for equities, but also for American workers, because the unemployment rate inevitably gets higher. And then the fourth one is this double dip idea, which is we're going to have another dip followed by 2% growth. In that case, you might as well just move to Brazil. I mean, that's about as bad as it gets. So I kind of told you my own view, which is, and 3 and 4 were never very plausible. And our view has been for a long time, it's going to be a mixture between 1 and 2. That it's nowhere, the rapid recovery is not in the cards, but the kind of lower path of growth going forward is the normal 3% growth. That's the iatrogenic word again, which is that there was a lot of policy uncertainty that came out of Washington, and the story is that deters business expansion, but that suggests that it's businesses that are the driver in the economy. It's really not. It's the consumer spending, and it's jobs, jobs, jobs. I'm going to get to my view, which is different from the ones that you're hearing, and I think when you hear it, you're going to see that there's some validity to it. It's distinct, but there's substantial validity to it. So just to see a picture of these 4 forecast scenarios, that's the historical trend. 3%. That's the dip down of GDP. So the scenario 1 says we're going to return to the normal growth trend within 3 or 4 years. That requires a supernormal growth to get us back to trend. That's scenario 1. Scenario 2 is we grow parallel to the normal growth path at 3%. Scenario 3 is that's the PIMCO 2%. And then the 4th scenario is we're going to have another dip and then grow at the PIMCO rate. At the end of 10 years, that item 4 is 22% lower than it would be under normal growth. So these things compound and add up. Very, very important differences among these 4 different scenarios. But in terms of the total dip, it's not that much different. So understand that the rhetoric that says this is the worst since the Great Depression is technically accurate, but rhetorically extremely misleading, because in terms of GDP decline, it's only slightly more extreme than these others. It's the absence of recovery that's the problem. See, normally we'd see that arrow there, exactly. You'd be getting that strong growth like we always have. That's what's different this time. It's not the depth of the recession, it's that we're not getting a recovery. We're not getting a recovery because we're not getting the jobs. If you generate more jobs, those people who have the jobs produce GDP, and you get that exceptional recovery. So that's the puzzle. The puzzle isn't having to do with the depth of the recession. The puzzle has to do with why don't we get the jobs back. This is the same picture with regard to the job market. So the yellow diamonds represent where we are. You can see that these, within typically about 2 years, you lose a bunch of jobs, you lose 2 or 3% of the jobs, but you get them back. This thing lasts about a couple of years. We're already 3 years in this thing, and we're at the real bottom in terms of jobs. We're down 6%. You can see this one, the yellow diamonds here. It's a totally different kind of experience this time. A totally different kind of experience. So that's our puzzle. From a forecasting standpoint, that's the fundamental question that we have to answer, which is why is the job market so darn different this time? Why are we not getting that kind of typical recovery? And then Ben Bernanke is very worried about this too. If we have this high unemployment, which I think is going to be a fact of life, it's going to affect politics in this country big time. It causes terrible problems for our young kids who are trying to find jobs, not getting jobs, and they get really discouraged. Their whole lives are affected. Economists who have studied this find that these students who graduate into a bad job market and struggle finding jobs, their whole lives, their productivity and income throughout their whole lives are affected by this. And this could last a long time and cause deep problems for this country. We've got to solve this problem. We've got to get the job machine running again. And I don't mean just normal, which is 150,000 jobs a month. We have to have 250,000 so we get people back to work who are unemployed. 150 isn't going to do it. So what ails the U.S. job market? There are basically 2 views. One is it's inadequate demand. And how we're going to create more demand is a fiscal stimulus and a monetary stimulus. If the initial monetary policy with incredibly low interest rates doesn't do it, then you do QE1. And if QE1 doesn't do it, then you do QE2. But maybe you ought to stop and think that all that medicine didn't work, and maybe that medicine is appropriate for a different kind of ailment. Maybe we have something going on that doesn't respond well to either a fiscal policy or a monetary policy. It's not just simple overall aggregate demand. And I'm going to argue that it's this fundamental mismatch between the skills that are being offered by the workers and the skills that are actually needed in the job market. And that takes a long time to correct. It's not an overnight kind of phenomenon. They need to be transferred to other jobs. But this, more than ever before, we have a huge number of displaced workers. The other sector is retail. So we built, anybody who travels around Los Angeles, drive along Melrose, and there's an incredible number of vacancies in the retail area. But everywhere around the city, there's huge vacancy. That's a symptom of the job loss that's occurred in retail. And that's not coming back anytime soon, because American shoppers are not going to shop like they did anytime soon. By my reckoning, it's not just the shopping level, by the way, it's also the internet. I don't know about you, but I do more and more shopping on the internet. That's a job killer too. So the demand fall plus the technology has probably eliminated about 1 million retail jobs. So out of 6 or 7 million losses, most of those are not going to be recalled. So we've got about 5.5 million new jobs we've got to find for these people. So you're supposed to have an image of what these people look like in construction and manufacturing and retail, and think about where they could possibly be hired. Education, health services, so maybe some health services, but maybe not. Finance and insurance and real estate, probably not. I don't know if you've got the same image as I do, but that doesn't seem like the likely sector for most of these people. Information, not really. Movies or software coding, that doesn't sound right job for them. Professional business services, there is some temp work, business temp work, but most of these people don't have the kinds of skills even to do that. But government, no, we don't want to ramp up those jobs. Leisure and hospitality, well, maybe those are low-paid jobs though. Compared to manufacturing and construction, those are really low-paid jobs, and there's not enough of them. Other services, repair and maintenance, personal laundry services, religious, and then the ultimate one is private households. And then each one of these circles represent the volume of diesel fuel purchases along, and it turns out all along the interstates. So you think about it, what could be better than to monitor truck traffic at all these interstates all over the country? This is why we call it the pulse of commerce, meaning that the arteries of the system are the interstates that crisscross the country, and the product flowing in that artery is the lifeblood. If you don't move the product, then the economy comes to a crashing halt. So it's good news today. It hasn't been good news for about 3 or 4 months. And then this is our view, that the double dip delusion, we never thought there was much possibility of another dip, because when you fall on the floor, at least you have to get to your knees before you can fall again. The U.S. economy was still basically on the floor throughout this year. So the idea of another dip, there were no imbalances that had been built up. It would create another dip. The leakage to imports remains a troubling problem, because we're going to have demand that will grow, but a huge amount of the demand is likely to continue to leak to imports until we get a sharp depreciation of the value of the dollar. And we tend to emphasize scenario 2. The 3 and 4 we think of as pretty much irrelevant. It's 1 or 2, which is a normal recovery or back to normal 3% growth with normal job growth and with normal productivity growth. So we think 3% growth, payrolls growing at about 150,000 a month, persistently high unemployment. All those displaced workers are going to have a heck of a hard time finding jobs. By the way, a lot of the finding jobs means geographic relocations. Michigan is losing population. We have incredible loss of manufacturing jobs in some of these, Michigan, Ohio, some of these critical manufacturing states. It takes time to make those adjustments. And I think maybe some attention should be given to the adjustment beyond monetary and fiscal policy. Housing continues to be in the doldrum, but with jobs, we'll see the housing sector improve substantially. We knew that happened here in Southern California. I don't know how you recall, but we had a moribund housing market until about 1998, when jobs started increasing again in Southern California. We need the jobs. Job uncertainty prevents most people from even thinking about buying a home, and we have the doubling up problem still out there. And then we really think that the foundation for higher interest rates and inflation has been laid, and really the question is when we're going to see it more evident in the data. We are having an outbreak of higher interest rates over the last several months. The 10-year Treasury is elevated by about 100 basis points. We think more to come and more evidence of inflationary issues. Not now, because the firms don't have pricing power. You just get a little bit of growth. You see evident in the job market with some significant growth. That's when you have to start worrying about inflation. We're in a global competition, and we're losing out.
The subject matter that we're dealing with, for every answer, there's 5 more questions, and it is satisfying to see everybody participating and getting involved in a subject matter where facts and policy and human action in an inexact science of economics, and we're in the midst of it. And we could go on for a long time, and I want to encourage this. We have dessert, and I please take some of the dessert, because otherwise it's going to stay here at the house and I'm going to eat it. And I want you all to stay and talk some more, but I wanted to thank you, Ed, for coming here and for standing up here and just,